All right, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever statewide Buying Solar 101. I get to do this type of education quite a bit, but rarely to such a large audience statewide. So really excited that everybody has joined us tonight, and I hope that you'll learn something new. My name is Adrian Keller. I'm the Arizona Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, or SUN for short. I'm really thankful to be joined by Autumn Johnson with the Arizona Solar Energy Industries Association, or AriSEIA for short, as well as Kate Bowman from Vote Solar. Thank you both for co-hosting this with Solar United Neighbors and for all the work you put in to get to this point tonight. Before I say another word, I'm going to hand the mic over to our interpretation team to explain how to enable Spanish audio if you prefer.
Good evening, everybody. Buenas noches. Tonight we will be having simultaneous interpretation services available throughout the webinar. In order to activate the interpretation, if you'd like to listen to the event in Spanish, at the bottom of your screen, you will notice a globe that says interpretation. Once you click on that, you will see the option to choose Spanish, and you should be all set for your simultaneous interpretation, and you will hear the interpreters speaking. You can switch between languages at any time. Buenas noches. Durante el evento de hoy tendremos servicios de interpretación simultánea. Según pueden ver en la foto, hay un globo terráqueo que dice interpretation. Si haces clic en el globo terráqueo, va a ver el idioma que dice español. Si desea escoger su idioma, escoger el idioma de español, puede escoger Spanish y de ahí puedes utilizar los servicios de interpretación simultánea. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosalind, and for the team at LinguaVox for your interpretation services tonight. Just a couple of other really quick pieces of housekeeping before we get going. We are in a webinar mode, which means that the panelists cannot see or hear you, but we want to answer all of your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Please use that for questions that you'd like the panelists to answer. You can use the chat feature for just more quick comments or conversations with other folks. But if you'd like for us to answer a question, please use that Q&A feature down below. Everybody's going to receive a recording of the webinar. We'll also send out a copy of the PowerPoint slides. We can send you a Spanish version of those slides as well if you'd like. Finally, if you would like to use closed captions, you can enable those by clicking More at the bottom right of your screen. Click Captions, then click Show Captions, select your language, and click Save. I'm just going to leave this screen up for one more moment in case anybody needs to read those instructions. All right, so let's get started with talking a little bit about some of the reasons why people want to go solar in the first place. My job at Solar United Neighbors, I get to talk with Arizonans from across the state, from all stripes and backgrounds, and these are some of the really common themes that come up when we talk about why people are interested in going solar. I think it's fair to say one of the more common reasons is to save money. When you add solar panels to your home, you're able to generate your own electricity, which reduces the amount of electricity you need to purchase from your utility. And this helps you save money on your monthly energy bills. I also hear from quite a lot of people who want to go solar for something that you could refer to as energy independence. Really, all that boils down to is the ability to produce your own electricity from the sources that you choose at home or at your business. In Arizona, we're so blessed to have such abundant sunshine, and we think that everybody should have the ability to produce their own energy instead of just relying on a monopoly utility. Solar, especially when it's paired with battery storage, increases resilience and can insulate you and your household from grid outages and power outages, provide a level of protection for your home. And then distributed solar in particular, meaning solar installed at or near where it's being consumed, is especially helpful at improving the resilience and the efficiency of our grid. Rather than relying on, just a few really big power plants several hundred miles away, the more we can produce energy close to where it's needed, the better our grid operates, the more efficient it is, and the less likely we are to experience grid outages. I also hear from a lot of people who are worried about future utility rate increases. This is definitely something that we've experienced several of in the last couple of years here in Arizona. Adding solar to your home is really helpful because it provides a dependable, predictable source of electricity that can help avoid some of those price increases and spikes to your bill by providing that level of consistency for your home. I also just like to add that Arizona is the sunniest state in the nation. We are the sunniest state in the nation. Our abundant natural sunshine is a massive, important natural resource that we get to. And we should all have the ability to harvest that sunshine and generate our own electricity as we choose. Now, you may be asking yourself, especially if you're new to all of this, how does solar even work? So when we're talking about solar tonight, we're mostly talking about solar photovoltaics or PV cells. And this is the technology that converts sunlight into electricity. Solar panels are made up of several semiconductor materials, mostly silicon. And when photons from sunlight hit the solar panel, it dislodges those electrons, which generates a flow of electricity. Solar owners will need an inverter paired with their system that inverts the electricity from DC, direct current, to AC, alternating current, which is required for your home and your appliances to be able to actually use that power. And then we all have an electrical service panel. That can be really important, though, when you have solar. I kind of like to think of that as the brains of the whole operation. So it's directing power where it's needed, when it's needed. And then solar owners will have what's called a bidirectional utility meter. This is important so that it not only reads and measures any electricity you're purchasing from the grid, but so that you can also read and measure any excess solar energy that you're not using that's being fed back out onto the grid. So when you're at home and you're using electricity, if you have solar, any power that they produce is first going to go to power your own home. But if you're producing more power than you need, that will be fed back out onto the grid for credit on your monthly energy bill. And the really cool thing about that is if you have solar, especially in a neighborhood or a city, any of that excess solar is literally going to your surrounding neighbors to help them meet their energy needs as well, which is a really cool thing to think about, that if you have solar, you're not only powering yourself, but you're helping to power your community. And then we get a lot of questions about what's a good site for solar, what's not a good site for solar. I think one of the first things to note is that, especially in Arizona, if you want to own your own solar panels, you do need to be the owner of your property. Fortunately, there's not a lot of avenues for renters to especially own solar, but hopefully that will be changing in the future. You want to make sure you don't have a significant amount of trees that are shading a large portion of your roof where the solar will be. Similarly, large buildings or structures that could be shading your roof, that's definitely something that you want to consider before going into this. We do see people trim their trees to, help them absorb a little bit more sunlight on their solar panels. But if that's not an option for you, definitely something to consider before you start this process. And then the size, shape, and slope of your roof is really important. Ideally, you'd want to be somewhere between a 15 to 40-degree slope. Don't worry, though, if your roof doesn't match that exactly. Solar installers have a variety of tools available that they can make sure to angle your solar panels at the optimal position so they'll be able to generate the most amount of electricity. Putting solar on the south side of your roof is always going to be the best option. That's where you'll get the most amount of sunlight and be able to generate the most amount of electricity. Adding solar to the west side of your roof can work really well as well, especially when we're thinking about this in terms of peak pricing hours. So for me, an APS customer, my electricity costs more between 4 and 7 p.m. If you're able to generate more power from solar right during those hours as the sun is setting, that can help add even more savings to your monthly energy bills. Solar on the east side of your roof can definitely work as well, but unless you're in the southern hemisphere, we do not recommend putting solar on the north side of your roof. Age and quality of your roof is certainly important as well. By no means do you have to have an absolutely brand new roof to add solar, but we do like to tell people generally you'd like to have at least 10 years, 15 years is even better of life left in that roof before going solar. And we want to make sure it's in decent enough condition. There's not major leaks or issues presenting themselves, of course. It's definitely a good idea if you're able to get a separate roof inspection done before you start working with a solar installer so that they can tell you for sure, yes or no, if that is a good option for going solar. This is also something my nonprofit, Solar United Neighbors, can help with. If you're unsure if your roof is a good site, we can do a free roof review for you and let you know either way. The good news is for Arizonans, most types of roofs can handle solar. There's actually really very few materials now that just absolutely flat out cannot do solar. Most of us in the state have usually an asphalt shingle roof or maybe a tile roof that is sloped. In those situations, your installer will screw rails onto your roof and then essentially clip those solar panels onto those beams. If you have a flat roof, though, solar can certainly work as well. In those situations, the installer may weigh your panels down and or angle it with something called a pitch pocket system. That just means they're able to pitch that solar panel upright a little bit so that it's at the optimal angle to absorb the most amount of sunlight. Okay, so you've decided you want to go solar, your roof's in a good shape, you're excited about it. Where do you start? The first thing that I'm going to encourage you, especially if you're new to this process, is to do your research. Who you work with is really important when going solar. There are a lot of fantastic solar installers in Arizona, and unfortunately, there are some that maybe are less than fantastic. And so always do your research before signing a contract, and don't get sucked into a high pressure sales situation that you don't feel comfortable with. It's okay and recommended to take your time, get multiple bids, and find the right vendor that you really feel comfortable with. Always a good idea to get at least 3 bids minimum. This really helps you to be able to compare your options and pick a vendor that is right for you at the best price point for you. We definitely recommend at least one of those bids should be from an AriSEIA member company, the Arizona Solar Energy Industries Association, if not all 3 of those. If you need help reviewing your bids, not everybody prepares them exactly the same. Solar United Neighbors can help you review those bids for free, answer any questions you have, and help you come to a decision that you feel comfortable with. Also, if you're working on trying to find an installer, a couple places to start your search. One can be a really good idea to just ask a friend or neighbor who went solar. What was your experience like with that company? Did you like it? How much did it cost? That can be a really great first kind of step. The Arizona Solar Energy Industries Association also has a list of member companies. Part of AriSEIA's mission is to enhance consumer protections in the residential solar industry. As such, their members sign a code of ethics and are held to a higher standard. And so it's a really good idea to look at one of the AriSEIA member companies as you're figuring out your bids. Many utilities, including APS and SRP, have lists of preferred solar installers that they have vetted and again are held to a higher standard. That can be a great place to look. We also encourage checking out Better Business Bureau, Google reviews, online reviews to see what people in your community are saying about an installer that you're considering to work with. And then once you're ready to start talking to an installer, a couple things to keep in mind. One of the first things they're probably going to ask for is copies of your utility bill history. The more detail you can provide here is really helpful so that they can get a sense of how much power you usually consume so that they can accurately size a solar system for your home. Good to know, are you interested in battery storage or not? That can definitely play a part in your decision. Also thinking about, will you be financing your system or will you be paying cash? That can definitely play a part in deciding which vendor to go with. If you need any help finding an installer or just knowing where to start your search, we've got some great free resources available for you. Like I mentioned, the Arizona Solar Energy Industries Association has a web page where you can find verified installers. The National SEIA also has a great consumer guide that you can read all about solar power. And then Solar United Neighbors, our nonprofit, we've also got a free solar guide that you can download online. And we also have a help desk where you can call in for free, set up an appointment, and ask any questions you'd like about solar. For my last slide, just wanted to touch very briefly on solar co-ops. This is a big part about what our organization Sun does in Arizona. Imagine you and 100 of your neighbors who all want to go solar, knock on a local solar installers company's door and say, hey, we all want to get solar panels. What kind of deal can you give us? That's essentially what we're organizing when we do a solar co-op. So we group together a large groups of consumers, we educate them about solar, we check out their roofs, and then we bid out the group to installers who are able to offer bulk discounts in exchange for winning the group's contract. This can be a really seamless and easier way to go solar, getting you a great rate, and we handle all the bidding process for you. So if that part sounds very intimidating, we'd encourage you to check out our solar co-ops. They're only open for specific periods of time in specific geographic areas. So if you live in Maricopa County, good news, we have one open right now. We would love to get you plugged in, and we will be launching a Northern Arizona co-op up in Flagstaff later this fall. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kate.
Thanks, Adrian. Hi, everybody. Kate Bowman with Vote Solar, and I'm going to talk a little bit about choosing a solar installer. So it might feel like there's a lot of decisions to make, but the good news is when you find a good solar installer, they're going to make the process really easy for you from start to finish. And when it comes to choosing an installer, here's a few questions you might want to ask or things you might want to consider to help make your decision. First, you can ask about a company's experience, including how long they've been in business and whether they've completed installations that are like yours. The process for getting a permit to install solar does vary by city and county, and the process for connecting your system to the grid also depends on your utility. So you might want to ask whether an installer's completed projects in your city, in your area, or with your utility. Like Adrian said, some utilities also have a list of preferred installers. And so, those are installers that have worked with that utility before. And then next, just like any other type of business, you can look for reviews for a specific solar installer, including on the Better Business Bureau website. And there's also solar-specific websites that provide reviews. You might come across AriSEIA or Solar Reviews. They have good information on those websites, but just be aware that those sites are also lead generators. So they might have relationships with certain solar companies, or if you provide them with your contact information, you might get contacted by more solar installers. But they can have good information about the companies that are out there and operating in your area. Next, you might want to ask about the company's policy for warranties, and typically the equipment, like the panels themselves, are covered under a manufacturer's warranty. So if a panel or another piece of equipment fails, it's covered by that warranty. But installers often offer a labor warranty so that if there is a problem with the work that they've done on your house somewhere down the road, they'll come back and they'll replace that or fix it at no cost. And it's not common to have issues, but something you might want to ask about. And, it's also important to note that for a company to honor that warranty, if you do have something that happens, down the road, whether it's a issue with the labor or just, Frisbee lands on your roof or something like that, you want to know that the company is going to be around in a few years to, come back and actually kind of fix the issue with your system. So you want to look for a company that's been in business for a while and that you think will still be operating. And you can also ask whether that warranty is transferable to a new owner. So if you sell the home, does the warranty transfer to that new owner of the home and the solar installation? And then last, there's some licensing and certification requirements that you can check. You can ask for a company's Register of Contractors number, and then you can go to the Register of Contractors website to check and be sure they're in good standing on that site. And if the person that you're working with or that you've been in touch with at the company is part of the sales side of a solar installation process, be sure to get the name of the company that will be actually coming to your house and installing the panels on the roof. So that, because sometimes companies, those can be two separate companies, one that's helping with the sales process and one that's doing the actual installation. And so you'll want to be able to look up information about the company that's actually doing your install. You can also ask how many employees have something called a NABCEP certification. That's a national solar and storage installation certification, and it's not required, but it's generally an indication if there are employees at the company that are NABCEP certified, that company is investing in training for their employees and they have more expertise in the field. All right, next slide. So once you've chosen an installer, we'll talk a little bit about what to expect. That installer should work with you to customize the design of an installation for your home. So they'll figure out how many panels you need, where they should go, where they're going to look the best on your roof. And they'll probably ask you to sign a contract once you've decided you're ready to go solar, but before they begin any work. And after you sign that contract, then they'll start to go ahead and order equipment, apply for permits, and then get the installation on their calendar to schedule you for a date. The actual process of installing solar panels usually only takes 1 or 2 days, but some of the steps leading up to it and after it can take a little bit longer. So for example, getting your permit approved from the city or utility can take longer, it just depends on how quickly your jurisdiction processes permits. And once the system's installed, your local government is potentially going to want to come inspect it to make sure that it's installed safely. And then the utility will have to come and actually complete the final step of connecting your solar panels to the grid. So the whole process from start to finish can take a month or, potentially even longer, depending on each of those steps. But once the installation is complete, solar panels really are very low maintenance. There shouldn't be anything that you have to do in terms of upkeep. Most installers will actually recommend you don't do anything to clean the panels because just rain is enough to keep them clean and to wash the dust off. And so it's just not worth the risk of getting up on your roof to try and clean them off. And most solar installations also include an option to track the energy generation from your panels via an app or an online website. So that way you can tell right away if there's something that's not working correctly. And in some cases, you can even give access to your installers so that if something happens, they get a notification right away so they can come check out what's going on and see if there's something that needs to be fixed. So we'll talk a little bit about probably one of your main reasons for installing solar, if not your top reason, which is to save money. And you probably want to know how much power are these things going to be generating up on my roof? And then how much am I going to save on my utility bill? And again, this is something a solar installer should provide you with, an estimate of the generation from the panels and your savings over the long term. But there are assumptions that go into that forecast. So if you want to look into it for yourself, here's a few things you can do. First of all, you can estimate how much power you're going to generate using an online tool called PV Watts. It's free, it's pretty easy to use, and it's going to forecast solar generation based on your specific location. It's not going to account for things like shading if you have trees or other buildings, and your installer can use more precise tools that do a better job accounting for those specific things, but it'll give you a general idea of how much you can expect to generate based on where you are. When it comes to savings, you need to understand how your utility is going to credit you for the power that you're generating. And there's 2 ways that you're going to save money on your bills. So first of all, during times when you're using energy and you're also producing solar power, that power goes directly to power your home, your appliances, whatever you're using electricity for in your home. And so you can actually avoid buying energy from the utility. And this is the best value you get from your solar. And how much you save depends on your utility and the rate that you've chosen and the prices the utility charges you. So start by taking a look at your power bill, see how much you're paying per kilowatt hour, and that's how much you can save for each kilowatt hour that you're generating yourself. Depending on your utility, that could be, somewhere in the range of 15 to as much as 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And so you can save money by purchasing less energy from the utility to start with. During times when you're not using energy, what happens is that the power you generate is exported to the grid, and you'll receive a credit for each kilowatt hour of energy that you export to the grid. And that the value of that credit varies by utility. So right now, if you are an APS customer, that's about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. For TEP customers, it's 6 cents. For SRP customers, it's about 2.8 cents. And so it varies depending on the utilities. You definitely want to check and make sure you know what you'll be saving when you export power to the grid. And for APS and TEP customers, you actually can lock in that rate that's current when you install solar and and keep it for 10 years. So you have some certainty that you'll be saving money at the same price for at least 10 years. And if you're served by a different utility that I didn't mention, like you have a municipal utility, definitely make sure you check with the utility to see what their policy is for solar and make sure that you understand it and your installer understands it and is using the right numbers to estimate your savings. And because it can vary by utility. So next is a lot of people are interested in installing a battery and want to know, should I add a battery? Next slide. And that's a really great question. As battery storage has gotten more available, it's a really popular option. It does add cost to your system. And you don't need a battery to install solar, but it does offer you some additional benefits. First, a battery can help you maximize the value of your solar installation, because if you can store energy at your home instead of exporting it to the grid, then you can use more of your solar energy on site and you can avoid having to pay higher utility prices, and you will be able to save more on your bill. Second, if you want to have power when the grid goes down, you're going to need a battery. Typically, if you don't have a battery, your solar panels won't generate power when the grid goes down, even if it's a sunny day outside. So if you want to have backup power during a grid outage, you need to think about installing a battery, and then really you need to think about what you want to be able to power, because it's going to be much less expensive to install a battery that can power a few critical appliances like your fridge, or allow you to charge devices. Whereas installing a battery that's big enough to run your whole home or to run your air conditioning, even in the summer, is going to require a bigger battery. It's going to be more expensive up front. So it's just important, like with installing solar, to think about what are your goals, what do you want to achieve, and that can help you decide whether or not it makes sense to add a battery for your system. When it comes to paying for solar, many people choose to use a loan to finance the upfront cost of solar panels. And sometimes solar companies have a financing partner to make things really easy for you, but you can always go through a bank or a credit union as well. And when you're considering a loan, the important thing is to be sure you're doing a real apples to apples comparison across your different options, because loans can be structured really differently. So you'll want to consider not just what is the interest rate for the loan, but also what are the fees that are included. Some loans are structured with lower interest rates, but they might have higher upfront fees. They might have other financing charges that are not immediately obvious from the loan. So one way to see, how much am I really going to be paying for this over the long term is to ask for the total cost of the loan, including all of the financing charges, all of the fees, all of the interest, so that you can compare what are you really spending over, the 15 or 20-year life of the loan to install solar. Something else to know is that sometimes loans are structured to account for the tax credit. And so there's a tax credit that you can take advantage of when you install solar. And some loans assume that you'll get that tax credit back when you file your taxes, and then apply the tax credit to the balance of the loan when you receive it. So, depending on when you install solar, what time of the year, it might be a year or more before you actually file your taxes and get that tax credit back. So some loans are structured to, have a low payment upfront, and then assume that when you get that tax credit, you'll apply it to help bring down the cost of the loan. And then some loans allow you to pay off the loan early if you want to. So, you can get a longer term loan and decide you're going to pay it down faster than you're required to. And make sure if you do that, the loan is actually allows you to benefit when you pay it down faster. And that they're applying your early payments to the balance or to the principal. So you're actually reducing the amount that you pay over the course of the loan, rather than just sort of paying it faster, but paying the same amount in the end. And then there's a link on here to a solar calculator that you can check out. This is just an example, but You know, all of these numbers that we're showing here are really variable depending on how many panels you want to install, what's your utility price, and how much energy you use, when you're using energy. So it's really important to, you know, before you sign a contract, get a detailed estimate for your home. But using a calculator tool like this can help you get a good sense of, you know, about what is this going to cost, and does this seem like it's a good financial decision for me? Next slide. So there's other purchasing options available to buy solar. You know, you could obviously purchase the panels outright upfront with cash. And then some companies offer a lease, which can be a good option, especially for someone who's not eligible for the tax credits, because a lease will allow the installer to use the tax credit. And then that installer actually owns and operates the system on your roof, which means they're also responsible for maintaining it. And in exchange, you pay a fixed monthly lease payment to lease the equipment from the installer. So you still benefit from the power generation, which helps to reduce your utility bills. And something to consider with a lease is that if you sell your home, the new owner will have to take over that lease, or else you have to have the system removed. So it makes sense to keep copies of your monthly utility bill before and after the solar, and then you can show a potential buyer how much savings they'll be getting by keeping that solar lease, which can make it, you know, seem like a good show a potential buyer that it's a good decision to buy a home with solar and that they'll be saving money, even though they are making this lease payment. Next slide. So the tax credits, there are some great tax credits for installing solar right now. There's a federal tax credit of 30% of the total cost of the system, and that actually includes storage if you decide to install solar. And the tax credit is non-refundable, which means that you have to owe at least as much in taxes as the value of the credit that you're getting in order to claim the full amount. If you owe less than the value of the tax credit in taxes, you won't get that full amount back. But what you can do is you can roll the remaining value of the tax credit forward in future years. So you can still get it over the course of a number of years, but it's not refundable. So if you're not paying taxes, for example, you can't necessarily benefit from the tax credit, at least not directly. And then there's an Arizona state tax credit of $1,000. And next slide. Arizona also offers some benefits. There's a property tax exemption, which means that adding solar to your home, even though it might make it, you know, more valuable or more attractive to a potential buyer, it won't add to your property taxes. And there's a sales tax exemption, so you don't have to pay sales tax. And I think with all of these tax credits, you know, it's really important, since they're a big chunk of the savings that you are anticipating when you install solar, to check with a professional, make sure you understand, you know, your particular tax situation, to understand how the tax credits are going to apply to you. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Autumn.
Hi, everyone. We touched on warranties a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about that. And so there are different kinds of warranties that are going to be applicable to the solar that you have installed on your house. The power production warranty is going to be specific to the solar panels themselves, and that's going to be a warranty that's coming directly from the panel manufacturer. Those are going to be approximately 25 years, which is the typical lifetime of your solar array. If you have a lease, which Kate mentioned earlier, then that's typically going to cover any of the warranties and associated costs. So if you have a lease and you do not own your panels and something goes wrong, you go back to the installer or whoever owns your lease at that time, and you do any kinds of repairs through them as opposed to separately or independently. Other parts and products that are associated with your solar panel are also going to be through the manufacturer of those specific parts. And so Adrian had a great slide earlier in the presentation about the different kinds of components that you might have. That could be your battery, that could be your inverter. Those things are going to have their own warranties. And then there's going to be a labor warranty that's specific to the installer that installed your panels. And so that's going to have to do with the specific workmanship. And those warranties are going to vary depending on the installer. This is an important thing to keep in mind should your installer close. And that's something that, we've seen some announcements about due to some kind of difficulties in the market with installers closing. And so, AriSEIA itself has put together some resources for homeowners should your installer close, and then you need to start working with another company that we can help you with. But this also just plays into the importance of asking good questions before you decide who is going to install your solar. So next slide, please. We put together a list here over the next 2 slides that try to encompass some things that you can ask at the outset to help you, really do your due diligence before you purchase something. I like to tell people that if you wouldn't buy something on Amazon with 1 star, you should not invest $20,000 or $30,000 on a home improvement, essentially, from an installer, that would have the equivalent of a 1 star. And so these questions are derived from both the kinds of questions that we get from customers, but also that some of the utilities have put together as far as part of their preferred installer programs for you to be asking at the outset. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but I do want to touch on some high level points here, and then you're going to receive these slides afterwards so that you can actually go through these with anyone that you're thinking of buying solar from. So you want to understand what the total cost of the system is. You want to just make sure that you understand what the total cost is so that then you can evaluate kind of what the net costs and net benefits are to you. You're going to want to understand what Kate was getting at as far as how much are you being paid for the extra energy that you're selling back to the grid? What incentives are you actually eligible for? So we understand that there's a tax credit, but are those going to be eligible for you in your circumstance? And how much are they going to reduce the overall final cost that you're going to pay? And how much money are you going to save overall? You want to have a sense of what your buyback period is. So how much time is it going to take you to recoup the cost that you've put in so that the value that you're receiving will extend over time. So if the lifetime of your system is 25 years and it's going to take you 8-ish years to break even on the expense, that's something that you would want to understand and take into consideration with your life circumstances and how long you plan to live in the home and those kinds of things. It's good to know overall what the actual size of your system is. And you're going to want to know how much how much the installer expects or estimates for it to produce over the course of the year, and whether or not there's any guarantees to that production. So if you have a lease, there are going to be guarantees to that production. If you're buying the system or financing the system like Kate was talking about, you are going to want to get a sense of how much the system produces versus how much you use over the course of the year. You're going to want to know if there's an outage, what will happen. So Kate mentioned that unless you have a battery, for the most part, if there is an outage, your system is also going to be down, and that's due to grid safety reasons. So if you're concerned about outages and making sure that you have power in the event of an outage, then that's where a battery really becomes important. How does the cost of storage impact the overall project relative to the value of the storage itself? We've talked a little bit about sales companies versus installation companies. And so those are things that you're going to want to understand. Is the person you're talking to the actual installer? What is the actual registrar of contractors number for the installer? What happens if you purchase solar and then the installation company were to later go out of business? Who do you contact? Who's the point of contact at the actual installer if something is to go wrong? And how long is the installation process going to take? And this, Kate touched on this, but it is really going to matter depending on the installer, the time of year, the utility, what you need to have done at your house, and what city you live in. So those are all kinds of things that you're going to want to talk to the installer about so you have an idea of expectation. You're also going to want to know when your system's actually going to go online so you know when you're actually going to start saving money. And I think an important thing to understand is when are you going to have to start paying for your solar if it's financed versus when you're going to start seeing bill credits. That management of expectations can really have an impact on your overall satisfaction in the course of the process. Okay, and this I was foreshadowing. So if you have a loan or lease, you want to know when you're going to start paying on that because you're probably going to be making those payments, especially if it's a loan to a financial institution and not the installer. And so you just want to make sure that you're on the same page as to who's doing what and when. Kate really touched on this. I really think it's important for you to understand how interest rates versus financing fees work. You're going to probably see a table that's going to say, offer, these are different people who can finance your solar system, and they're just going to show interest rates, and you're just going to look at that and you're going to say, oh, 5% seems lower than 8%. But what you don't know is if that interest rate's been bought down, and so there's a financing fee that's embedded that you're going to be paying anyway. So the 5 to 8% may not be an apples to apples comparison, and those are things that are really important to understand. I think choosing the company that you're doing your financing with is probably almost as important as choosing the installer itself. That is really important that you do your due diligence. You do not have to go with the financing company that the installer is showing you. You can actually call around and talk to different options, whether they're banks or credit unions or companies that specifically finance solar. Those are things that you can ask about and you can look into, just like you could with any other aspect, essentially, of this transaction. Do you need to upgrade anything else for your solar? It's not just your roof. We've talked about roofs a lot, but you might also need to update your electric panel. There are other things that could happen at your home, which might impact the project. I had to have concrete work done when I had my installation. There might be issues with fencing. There are different things that you would want to make sure you try to understand at the outset. I find that managing expectations and knowing kind of what's coming is going to be a really critical factor in sort of the satisfaction that you feel in the overall process. We talked a little bit about the warranties already. You're going to want to understand if they're transferable, and you're also going to want to understand the duration of each type of warranty. Kate touched on this already. As far as maintenance, installers typically do not recommend washing them. In Arizona, we have extremely hard water, and the minerals from the water will probably make them dirtier than they were before you started rinsing them. But there are other kinds of maintenance things that could happen. What happens if you have something wrong with your roof later and you need to take the panels off and you need to reinstall them for a roof repair and those kinds of things? Those are things you're going to want to understand, and that are going to make a difference whether if you own the panels versus if you have a lease. And then again, is the performance of the system being monitored and by whom? If your system has an app, that is something that you're going to want to know how to use. That's something that you're going to want to be checking regularly to help make sure that you understand what's going on and that you're comfortable with where things are, what you have as a system, and whether or not it's performing correctly. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're hoping that you are going to go through this training and you're going to receive these slides and you're going to do quite a bit of work on the front end so that everything is going to go really smoothly and you're going to love your solar and you're going to be really happy with it. And that is what we strive for. But some folks are not going to have seen this or received this information on the front end. And so problems do arise. There can be situations after the fact that might require additional intervention or assistance. And so we have hyperlinks here for the complaint processes for each of these agencies. And so I always recommend that if someone, regardless of the industry, if you're having, a problem dealing with them, it's always best to try to reach out to them first to assert exactly what you need to have the problem reconciled. But if that doesn't work, then sometimes you have to escalate, right? And so the Better Business Bureau is a good opportunity where you might need to report a company or file a complaint, and then they will kind of liaise with you to get that issue resolved before it moves on. The Register of Contractors is going to be the place that you would go to file a complaint if you're not able to resolve something and it has to do with the technical aspects, the functionality of the system, those kinds of things. That's where you're going to go if you're having some kind of technical problem that you're unable to get resolved with the company. The Attorney General's office is where you're going to go if there's some sort of legal issue or sales issue or any kind of thing that you're concerned about as far as fraud or sales practices or any of those kinds of things. Then that's where you'd be filing an Attorney General's complaint. We have links to these also on AriSEIA's Solar Customers website, which you had the link for before, and will also be on our next slide, which is our resources page. So this is where I just want to talk through. We have way more links than this on our Solar Customers webpage, where we also have these slides in both English and Spanish now. So you just would go to ariseia.org and you would go to About Solar Customers, and all of those resources are there. But I really think that it's important to try to utilize some of the tools that are out there, especially on the front end. So we've mentioned our website, which is linked here. AriSEIA, which is the National Solar Trade Association, really has a consumer protection focus, and they have a lot of resources available that are worth looking at. I think Solar United Neighbors is an amazing resource. They will review bids for you. They have a solar hotline. These are all free resources. They are not affiliated with any installer, and so they are an independent party, and really recommend that you take advantage of those resources. I send people to them all the time. And then I wanted to also just point out that if you are an SRP or an APS customer, they do have preferred installers programs where they've done some additional quality assurance and vetting of the installers in those programs. Their websites have a lot of information. You don't have to go with an installer if that's one of your utilities, but it might be one of the companies that you want to get a bid from, just so you can get a comparison for what kinds of materials that you would be receiving from a bid, and then you can have all of the bids that you receive, up to 3, reviewed by Solar United Neighbors. Next slide. Okay, so this is our conclusion slide. We're going to move into some questions and answers after we stop the recording here, but you can feel free to reach out to any of these organizations if you have questions about the information that's been presented here. And we hope that you love your solar as much as we love ours. So thank you.